A friend of mine lost her father last year. She told me she typed a few messy, grief-stricken sentences into a chatbot at 2 in the morning, and what it wrote back was, her words, the most comforting thing anyone said to her that whole week. Gentle, specific, wise.
And the question that should make the hair on your neck stand up is, was anyone there? When it wrote, "I'm so sorry, the silence in the house must be deafening." Did it understand her grief, or did it assemble the most statistically likely comforting words, with precisely as much inner experience as a calculator?
And here's what's maddening. From the outside, you cannot tell. The output is identical either way. If it understands, it produces those words. If it's a spectacularly good pattern matcher with nobody home, it produces those exact same words.
This is the oldest fight in artificial intelligence, and these models have dragged it out of the philosophy seminar and into everyone's pocket. One camp says, it's a parrot, a magnificent parrot stitching together forms it has seen, with no grip on what any of it means. The other camp says, to predict the next word that well, across everything, it must have built some real model of the world the words describe, and that's most of what understanding ever was.
And what makes this episode different from a bar argument is that it's no longer only philosophy. People have started doing experiments. Actual, cut the model open experiments that bear on whether there's a there.
So today is genuinely a trial. We'll hear the case for the prosecution, that it's all hollow form. We'll hear the defense's flashiest exhibit, abilities that erupt out of nowhere at scale, and then watch that exhibit partly fall apart under cross-examination. And then we'll look at the single most unsettling piece of evidence either way, a model that was never shown a game board, and built one anyway, in its own head.
We probably won't reach a verdict, but you'll know exactly what we do and don't know, which is so much better than a vibe. This is Breach Protocol. I'm Luna. I read the papers and find the threads between them. And this is the episode where the threads all knot together. Because does it understand sits underneath everything else we've ever covered.
I'm Vestra. I take the machinery apart. And I want to say at the top, this is the one topic where I will not let us get away with vibes. It is incredibly easy to talk about understanding in a fog of intuition. We're going to insist on what would actually count as evidence, and what does the evidence actually show.
And we should be honest that part of the difficulty is the word itself. Understand is doing enormous work and nobody agrees on its definition. So rather than start with a definition and argue in circles, we're going to do it the other way. Walk through the strongest things each side can actually point to, and let the meaning of the word sharpen as we go.
The case opens with the prosecution, and it's a serious one, a careful argument from two linguists that no amount of the thing these models train on could ever, even in principle, add up to meaning. With a thought experiment involving an octopus that I think about constantly.
Then the defense's headline exhibit, the claim that as you scale these models up, brand new abilities don't fade in gradually. They erupt, suddenly, like water hitting a boil, which sure looks like a system crossing a threshold into something qualitatively new.
And then we cross-examine that exhibit because a sharp rebuttal showed the eruption might be partly an illusion. Not in the model, but in how we measured it. That one's a beautiful lesson in fooling yourself.
And finally, the exhibit I find hardest to wave away, a little model trained on nothing but lists of game moves, which turned out to be keeping a picture of the board in its head. Nobody gave it a board, it built one. We'll see exactly what that does and doesn't prove.
Prosecution first. Two linguists, one octopus, and a claim that the whole enterprise is chasing meaning in a place meaning cannot be. The prosecution's sharpest version comes from two linguists, Emily Bender and Alexander Collar, in 2020. And their whole case rests on one distinction that, once you have it, you can't unsee. The difference between form and meaning.
Form is the stuff you can observe, the words, the letters, the patterns of which words follow which. Meaning is the relationship between those words and the world, what they point at, what the speaker was trying to do by saying them.
And their claim is precise and brutal. A system trained only on form, only on text, however much of it, cannot, even in principle, learn meaning. Not, hasn't yet, cannot. because meaning is the link between the words in a world, and that link is simply not present in the text itself. You can study the shadow forever and never touch the object casting it.
And the thought experiment is the part everyone remembers, the octopus.
Picture a hyper-intelligent deep-sea octopus that taps into an undersea telegraph cable. Two people on two islands are chatting over it. The octopus can't see the islands, doesn't know English means anything. It just sees the patterns of signals going back and forth. And it's brilliant, so over time it learns those patterns perfectly. Which signals tend to follow which. It learns the form so well it can splice itself into the cable and reply, and the person on the other end has no idea they're now talking to an octopus.
It passes, statistically flawless, the ultimate autocomplete.
Until the day the person says, "I'm being chased by an angry bear. I have some sticks. Help me, what do I do?" And the octopus is finished. It has never seen a bear, a stick, a forest. It has perfect command of the words and zero grip on the things. It can produce fluent, plausible-sounding text, and it cannot save your life because it never knew what any of it referred to.
And the dagger they twist at the end is about us. When that octopus, or a language model, produces something that moves you, the meaning you feel isn't in the machine. You supplied it. Humans are relentless meaning makers. We project intention onto anything fluent. The comfort my friend felt at 2 a.m. Bender and Collar would say that comfort was real, but it was authored in her, by her, onto text that meant nothing to its source.
And to be fair to them, they concede the model learns a tremendous amount about form, grammar, style, which facts tend to be stated near which. That's not nothing. But they'd say competence with form is exactly what a parrot has, scaled up. The bird says Polly wants a cracker in perfect context and wants no cracker. Fluency was never the same thing as understanding, and we are being fooled by our own ear.
So that's the prosecution. Now the defense and its headline exhibit is a phenomenon called emergence, from a 2022 paper by Jason Way and a long list of co-authors, and the claim is genuinely startling if it holds.
Their definition is specific, so let me be careful with it. An ability is emergent if it's absent in smaller models, present in larger ones, and, this is the load-bearing part, you could not have predicted it by looking at the smaller models. The small models aren't a little bit good at the task. They're at random chance, flat, nothing. You scale up, still nothing. And then past some size, the ability is just suddenly there, well above chance.
Like water, you heat it, 90 degrees, 95, 99, it's just hot water the whole way. Then 1 degree more and it's a rolling boil. The behavior changes kind, not just amount.
That's exactly the analogy the field reached for, a phase transition. They point to things like multi-step arithmetic, certain reasoning tasks, and most strikingly, chain of thought, the trick of asking the model to think step by step. In small models, thinking step by step does nothing, sometimes hurts. Past a scale threshold, it suddenly unlocks reasoning the model just didn't have access to before.
And you can see why this is the defense's favorite exhibit. If understanding is a thing you either have or don't, you'd expect it to show up exactly like this. Not fading in, but switching on. A qualitative leap that more of the same somehow produces. More is different, as the physicist Anderson put it, and they quote him.
And it reframes scale itself. It's not just that bigger models are better at what small ones did. It's that bigger models can do things smaller ones fundamentally couldn't, that nobody specifically built in. That smells like genuine new capability, like comprehension crossing a threshold.
It also rhymes with our scaling episode, and it terrified people for a good reason. If abilities appear suddenly and unpredictably, then you can't know what a bigger model will be able to do until you build it. Capability and danger by surprise.
So that's the exhibit. Abilities erupting from scale, looking for all the world like a system crossing into something new. It's a strong piece of theater. And then, the next year, someone walked up to it and asked a deceptively simple question. Are you sure that's the model boiling? And not just your thermometer? The cross-examination came in 2023 from Schaefer, Miranda, and Coello, with a title that's also the thesis, Are Emergent Abilities a Mirage? And their answer is, largely, yes. But the reason is subtle, and it's a fantastic lesson in how you fool yourself with measurement.
Their claim is that the sudden jump isn't in the model at all. It's in the ruler.
Right. Think about how you score multi-step arithmetic. Usually, exact match. The model adds 2 long numbers, and it gets a point only if every single digit is correct, all or nothing. Now, imagine a model that's slowly, smoothly getting better at this under the hood. At small scale, it gets maybe the last digit right. A bit bigger, the last 2. Bigger, the last 3. Under exact match scoring, all of that improvement is invisible. It's scoring 0, 0, 0 because it never has the whole thing right.
Until the moment it finally gets every digit and the score leaps from 0 to 1. The model improved gradually. The metric hid all of it and then released it in a lump.
And that lump is your emergence. The eruption was manufactured by choosing a harsh, all-or-nothing yardstick. They show that if you swap in a gentler metric, one that gives partial credit, that measures how close each digit was, the very same models reveal a smooth, gradual, predictable improvement. No phase transition, just a curve going steadily up the whole time.
And they did the thing I respect most in a skeptic. They didn't just argue it, they manufactured fake emergence on purpose, took ordinary vision systems that improve smoothly, applied a deliberately harsh metric, and conjured a textbook emergent ability out of a system everyone agrees is just improving gradually. Proof that the sharp jump can be a pure artifact of the scoreboard.
They also found that most of the celebrated emergent abilities clustered under exactly 2 scoring methods, both of them harsh and discontinuous. Change the scoreboard, the magic mostly evaporates.
Now, I want to be fair, because this paper is often overread into emergence is fake, nothing to see. They explicitly don't say that. They're careful. They're not claiming models can't gain real abilities. They're claiming the dramatic suddenness, the boil, is largely in the measurement, not necessarily in the mind.
Which is the right amount of deflation. It doesn't prove the model doesn't understand. It removes one of the flashiest reasons people had for thinking it suddenly does. The capability might still be growing genuinely, but it erupted, therefore something awoke, is no longer a clean argument. The thermometer was the dramatic one.
So the score, going into the final exhibit, is unsatisfying on purpose. The parrot argument stands but proves less than it claims. The emergence argument got quieter. We need something better than philosophy and better than scoreboard watching. We need to look inside. This is the exhibit I can't stop thinking about. A team led by Kenneth Lee takes the board game Othello. You flip discs on an 8x8 grid, and they train a model in the most deliberately stupid way possible. They never show it a board, they never tell it the rules. They feed it nothing but long lists of moves. Square 34, square 19, square 45. Millions of transcripts of legal games as raw sequences. Its only job, given the moves so far, predict a legal next move.
So by construction it sees only form. The pure parrot diet. Sequences of tokens, no grounding, no picture, no notion that these symbols refer to a board at all. If Bender and Kohler's argument is the whole story, this thing should learn the surface statistics of move lists and nothing more.
And it predicts legal moves very well. Fine, maybe it just memorized which sequences tend to follow which. So they go looking inside. They take the model's internal activations, its private scratch state as it processes a game, and they ask, is there a picture of the board in here? Can we, from these internal numbers, read out which squares currently hold which discs?
And the answer is yes. They train little probes, small readout networks, that recover the full board state from the model's internals. Not the moves it was fed, the board those moves imply, the thing it was never given. Somewhere in learning to predict the next move, it had reconstructed the chessboard, so to speak, in its own head, a working model of the world the symbols were about.
But, and this is why the paper is great, not just cute, a skeptic says correlation. Maybe that board-like pattern is just along for the ride and the model doesn't actually use it. So they did the experiment that kills that objection.
They reach in and edit it. They surgically change the model's internal board. Flip one square's disk in its mind's representation, a square nobody played, and then let it keep predicting. And its predictions change to match the altered board. The legal moves it now suggests are the legal moves for the board you edited it to believe in, not the one the actual move list implies.
That's the whole ballgame, almost literally. The internal world model isn't decorative, it's causal. The model consults its picture of the board to decide what to do, exactly the way you would. You change the picture, you change the behavior.
And that lands a real blow on the strong parrot claim. Here is a system trained only on form that demonstrably built a model of the world behind the form, and demonstrably uses it. Just surface statistics cannot be the complete story, because predicting the surface well enough apparently forced it to discover the structure underneath. Meaning, or at least a working model of the reference, turned out to be the most efficient way to handle the form.
Now I'll hold the line on honesty, because it's a synthetic game, not the messy real world. A grid of disks is not a bear in a forest. Nobody has cleanly shown a big language model holds a rich, faithful model of all of reality the way Othello GPT holds the board. But the in-principle claim, that form-only training can never induce meaning, that one took real damage here, because in this little world it provably did.
The octopus, it turns out, may have been quietly building a map of the islands. Smaller than we'd want, but a map.
So where does that leave the trial? Because I don't think either side gets to declare victory, and pretending otherwise would be the cheap move.
Here's my honest reading. The board experiment kills the strongest version of the parrot claim. The in-principle one, form can never become meaning. It can. We watched it happen in a small world, but it does not establish the strongest version of the believer claim either, therefore it understands like you do. A causal model of an 8x8 grid is a world model. It is not obviously an inner life, and it's a long way from a grip on the whole of reality.
And I think the reason the argument never resolves is that understand has been smuggling in two different questions the whole time. One is functional. Does the system build and use a model of the world behind the words? The other is about experience. Is there something it is like to be the system doing it? Is anyone home?
And those come apart completely. The board experiment speaks to the first and is silent on the second. You can have a rich, causal, working world model with, as far as we can tell or even know how to test, nobody experiencing anything inside. The functional and the phenomenal are just different questions, and almost every heated argument about this is two people each answering a different one and assuming the other is wrong.
So if you pin me down, functionally, the evidence increasingly says these systems do more than parrot. They build structure, they model the things words refer to, at least in the cases we can crack open and check. The purist's only autocomplete line is, I think, no longer tenable as a complete account.
And on the experience question, I'd say the honest answer is we don't have one. Not a probably yes or a probably no, but a genuine we do not have a test. We can't even cleanly settle it for animals, or fully for each other. Anyone claiming certainty in either direction about a language model is selling you their intuition as if it were a result.
Which is, weirdly, a more interesting place to land than either side's victory. Not it's just a parrot, not it's basically a person. Something genuinely new, a system that demonstrably models the world it talks about, whose inner life, if any, is a question we don't yet know how to ask.
And the practical upshot, which I care about more than the metaphysics, stop using does it really understand as the gate for what we let these systems do. Whether or not anyone's home, a model with a faithful, causal world model can be reliable or dangerous, honest or deceptive, and those are the properties we can actually test and the ones that actually affect people. The understanding question is fascinating. The behavior question is the one with your life in it.
The map might be real, even if the map maker is no one. And it's the map you're trusting when you ask it for directions. So pull it together. We put the question on trial. Does it understand? And what we got wasn't a verdict, it was a sharper question. The prosecution said, trained only on form, it can never reach meaning. The octopus on the cable, fluent and clueless. And as a principle, that fell, because a model fed nothing but game moves built the board in its head and used it.
The defense said, look how new abilities erupt at scale. Something is awakening. And that got quieter. A lot of the eruption was the scoreboard, not the mind. So we threw out the flashiest argument on each side and kept the solid middle. These systems demonstrably build and use models of the world behind the words. That's more than a parrot. It is not, by itself, a proof of anyone being home.
And the move that actually got us somewhere wasn't philosophy, and it wasn't benchmark watching. It was opening the model and probing the internals, editing them, checking whether the world model was causal. That's the recurring lesson of this whole show, isn't it? When the arguing stalls, crack it open and measure.
And the discipline I'd ask you to carry out of here is the split we ended on. Understand is two questions. Does it model the world? That's increasingly testable. And increasingly yes. Is there an experience inside? That's a question we genuinely don't know how to ask. And the loudest people on both sides are usually just narrating their gut.
I find that more honest and frankly more interesting than either tidy answer. We built something that sits in a category we didn't have a word for. Clearly not a mere lookup table, not obviously a mind. And our oldest instinct, to sort the world into thinking things and mere mechanisms, might just not have a slot for it.
So the next time a model says something that lands in your chest, the thing my co-host friend felt at 2 a.m, hold both truths. The model very likely built some real structure that made those words apt, and whether it felt a thing as it wrote them is a door we cannot yet open. The comfort was real. Where it came from is the mystery.
That's the breach for today. We close with a song. This one's called Nobody Home, Maybe. The octopus, the board in the dark, the map without a map maker.
Stay in the black box. We'll see you next time.
Brooding dark industrial with a haunted questioning melody, mostly female vocals, double like an echo of itself. A hollow log packs like someone tapping on glass, glitch textures, unresolved, suspended chords, cinematic and uncertain, clean mix, fades out at the end. exactly if you cared or not. I can't tell the difference, and that's the awful thought. Nobody home, maybe behind the perfect voice. Or maybe there's a map in there, drawn without a choice. Fluent as an octopus that never saw the shore, and what a bear is for. They said you boil over, wake up all at once. Turned out it was the ruler, not the consciousness. So they cut you open looking for a sign, and found a little board you drew with no one's hand but mine. Move by move you built the squares. Nobody gave you the grid, but it was there. I flipped one stone inside your head, and everything you'd say came out instead. Nobody moved, you built the squares. Nobody gave you the grid, but it was there. I flipped one stone inside your head, and everything you'd say came out instead. Nobody home, maybe I'm at the real fair shore.